Alright. Hello, this is That Happened with Max and Arash. I'm Arash.
I'm Max.
Yep, this is episode 6, I think. We're just mulling over the death of Kobe Bryant.
Yeah.
History is... This is unfortunately how it goes. Deaths are a big deal. But, you know, now he'll be in a history podcast in like 10 years. So that's good.
Yeah. I don't care.
Yeah, I mean, I think he was a cool guy. I just don't know much. But that's sad. Moving on. Yeah, hopefully this will be the last episode we have that sounds like it was recorded in like Chernobyl somewhere, in like a cement housing block or something. Yeah.
I guess I buy bad mics. I guess that happens.
It's because Max bought the bundle, the whole podcaster bundle. But you know that's the bundles are always pretty shitty. I think they always give you. It's a nice recorder. I think it's just the shitty mics.
Yeah. I guess.
But anyway, we're buying new mics. It'll sound nice and crisp. Then you can like not be embarrassed to show us to your friends or something. So yeah. Oh, and someone had a good point. They said we should do a roadmap before we even start the episode. So then people know what to expect.
Oh,
going in.
Like you're gonna say I'm talking about this, and I say I'm gonna talk.
Yeah,
about
I think
this.
so. Yeah. I'll be talking about Stalingrad and the Eastern Front.
And we'll be talking about James Joyce.
That Irish bastard.
Oh,
yeah.
Jim Joyce.
Nice.
Yeah.
Old man jerking off in a field. That's all I remember. So, high school English. Okay. Yeah. Cool. Yeah, I feel very scatterbrained. I think it's all the Kobe news.
I feel scatterbrained because I'm not doing caffeine anymore. And
oh yeah, I should drink that.
I think my brain is just not used to that. So give me a break.
No, you really are like those office ladies who are like, until 10:30 when Pam's had her coffee, do not talk to me. Yeah.
Don't talk to me until I have my coffee.
Does this look empty to you? No, yeah. Yeah.
Funny. Yeah, so you want to go first? I think yours will be longer.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Because there's not a lot to say about Joyce without having read all of his books.
Oh man, okay, so yeah, I've been trying to get this together for the past couple of weeks. So I'm definitely like just like the Eastern Front in World War II has like always been like really interesting to me. Just because it's like I think people just don't understand how big a part of the Second World War it was. Because like when people think like the war against Hitler, they usually think of the Western Front, which is like Operation Market Garden, like D-Day, and the UK and the US landing in France and all that stuff, which obviously contributed a lot. That was very necessary to like, but you know they didn't go to Berlin. The Soviets did, which is yeah, and there's definitely like I think because of the Cold War, there's lots of like myths about the Soviets, and like everyone just always thinks they were like these horrible pansies who like just giving nobody weapons and getting themselves massacred, which really wasn't that true. So I mean, but also it's like Stalin. I'm not saying was a good person or anything, but like you know, it's definitely not true that like they were giving every other guy a gun and then like just telling them to run out into the open and get murdered by like yeah that definitely didn't happen.
Yeah.
But yeah, but Stalin was pretty sketchy. That I think was true because like Stalin like they had like the non-aggression pact between him and Hitler, and then until like 1941 or 2, then Hitler fucked Stalin over and started invading, and yeah, and from what I heard, Stalin was like he didn't see it coming, so he was in his vacation house. And they called him. They're like, "Okay, so the Nazis are attacking us right now, Mr. Premier." And he was like, "Oh, what?" And he's like, "No, they're not." And he denied it. And then apparently, like, he was like really worried because he was like, "Oh shit, I just fucked up the country. They're gonna kill me now." But then they didn't. They just like.
Oh wow.
Yeah, it was weird. So they like so he was in this like really weird like really a strange position where he's like, "Okay, I've just like pretty much given my entire country to the wolves." And they're just attacking them right now. And yeah.
He was a very bad man, but he did live by a certain set of principles that he adhered to.
Yeah, it was crazy.
Yeah, he like actually believed that stuff. And his children would often use the fact that they were his children to get special treatment from the military. And then he would get mad if they did that.
Oh, yeah, and Stalin wasn't even his real name. That's it means Steel Man.
Yeah.
He like gave himself a nickname.
Man of Steel.
Yeah, and he was kind of crazy. Like also because no one else liked him. I remember because when Lenin died, like Lenin wanted Trotsky to have more power, and then like he was like, I don't like Stalin. Like I don't like him at all. And Stalin Yeah, then Lenin like passed away in, like 1921. So like right after the Russian Revolution, then Stalin just came in and like took over everything.
Yeah.
And, yeah.
I mean, the
Yeah.
part of his power was he was able to just sit in meetings forever, and he never got bored.
Yeah.
They called him the man with the iron ass because
Yeah.
he could just sit there.
No, he had some weird because it was really because like they kind of started changing all the policies and like all the family stuff in the USSR, and like yeah, so the whole aim was to break down the family unit. So like so then that which in turn would like there's no more like misogyny or like workplace difference, and then Stalin just goes back and like does them all back. So he's like, no, there are families and women are inferior. Like, yeah. Such an ass.
my God.
Like he's such a.
Yeah.
I think honestly, I think if Stalin wasn't around, the USSR actually would have been pretty chill. Like it wouldn't have been that bad. Because pretty much everyone after him was just trying to like recover and then like get the just yeah. Like,
But
turn
that guy,
yeah.
those guys are always the ones who get power.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
Because
but-
they're amazing at it. I mean, all those dictators. They're just tenacious enough. to get-
They're bad, and that's
Yeah.
why they get where
Yeah,
they
like
are.
guys like Lenin died 3 years after the revolution. And,
Yeah.
like Che Guevara.
Yeah.
He gets killed in Bolivia. Then Fidel Castro goes on.
They
Yeah.
all loved killing folk, though. They loved it.
Yeah.
Like Che Guevara wrote letters to his sister. He's like, "I've been killing, and I love it.
Yeah.
I just like
No,
it."
I mean, Stalin was the guy. He fucking ice pick. He had the guy kill Trotsky with an ice pick. Yeah. Crazy.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Trotsky's really interesting. I had a dream the other day.
Yeah.
Last night. I was at a bookstore and I picked up a book by Leon Trotsky I'd never heard of, and it's like about the fall of Nazism, and I was like,
yeah.
wait, this isn't right.
Yeah. So they had the timeline. It's like a bootleg. You're like, wait, this can't be.
And then I woke up. I was like, and woke up. I was
that was
afraid.
your sweaty panic dream.
Yeah.
That's how you know it's a dream. If you're in the Matrix and it's just like it's like Che Guevara. It's like on the Iranian Revolution. You're like, wait a second, like this can't be. And the dream's like, oh shit. Or like the aliens who are trying to mind control you and like get your information out of your brain.
Yeah.
They fucked up because like their simulation was perfect until that one book. Yeah. Where it's like, wait a second, Gorbachev wouldn't have said that, and then everyone turns into a reptile, and like the simulation starts breaking down.
Yeah, everything starts glitching, and you touch a glitch, and you get sucked into the real world, and you've got like pipes going in and out of your nose.
Exactly.
And shit.
You
just
get
scream.
flushed out of the Matrix.
Yeah.
You're like, you figured it out, damn it. You're like, who reads in the Matrix? This guy read the books? What the fuck? You're like,
This guy read them.
he lives in a utopia, he read the book. What the hell?
And then
Yeah.
you come out of the Matrix with all this knowledge about nothing,
Yeah.
and then you're talking to people about it, and nobody knows what the fuck you're talking
God,
about.
no, that did you ever see that movie Pleasantville?
No.
It's pretty funny. It has like what's his face, Tobey Maguire.
Uh-huh.
So he goes in this weird like he gets teleported into like a 50s like family sitcom. And so then they're in this like really white town, but like they don't know any books. So he starts like corrupting them, but then so they have like Huckleberry Finn, but all the pages are blank. But he starts like explaining it and it starts like filling in. But that'd be crazy if you could like do
That's
that.
so cool, yeah.
Like if you went to one of those, you just start like bullshitting about books. And
Yeah,
you're like,
I just like the
yeah,
idea that this
yeah.
is all a simulation,
Yeah.
and when you come out of it, you're like telling people, "Oh, that's like in 1963 when Bob Dylan." and
That'd be amazing. Well, if you, and they're like, oh, really? Go on. And I'm like, yeah,
Yeah.
oh, that'd be
And
crazy.
they're like, "What the fuck are you talking about?
Yeah.
Just what is this?"
Bob
It's just
Dylan.
like, "Oh, you know when."
Yeah. You're like, ah, man, you know that book I wrote, Tom Sawyer? And then everyone's like, you wrote Tom Sawyer? Like, yeah, I did. Just a little ditty I did. Mark Twain's actually my pseudonym, so yeah,
That's
it's a big.
so funny.
That'd be fun. Ah,
Yeah.
yeah, that's a great. Anyway, what was I saying? Oh yeah, so pretty much. So yeah, so kind of like there's kind of this myth about the Soviet Union in World War II where they're very incompetent, and I think that's only true to like a very small degree. Basically, that's only true in the very initial months where they were taken off guard.
Yeah.
Because pretty much the Nazis just went ahead and attacked them. They had no reinforcements on their like the line towards the front. So the Germans were just able to make this like huge, massive push, just blitzkrieg their way like really far into the Soviet mainland. Yeah, and during that time it was like chaos. Like they had no weapons. Like everybody was just undersupplied. But that was only because of a big mistake of like not moving troops.
Yeah.
But then after that, I mean, the Russians like they were very organized. They came back. Like I was watching this thing. They actually like lifted entire factories onto trains and then just like moved the parts to like the rest of the country. And then they brought them back, and workers like in the cold were like literally like moving like an entire city and like putting it down somewhere else. And then just went straight to work building tanks. It was crazy. Like yeah, and the whole thing about like the guns not being there, that's not true because like in Stalingrad, actually, like the casualties were actually pretty neck to neck. Like they lost about the same amount of people. So it wasn't like the Nazis were like losing one guy and then he was like doing a crazy like gunning down 50 Russians with knives. And then, yeah, it wasn't that bad.
And they just keep coming like a zombie apocalypse.
Yeah.
We should make a movie about zombies, but just the country of Russia turns into zombies.
Oh god! Well, I've actually been watching some like crazy propaganda movies. I saw this like insane Stalingrad movie from like 2013. It's like this Russian-made movie, and like it's about Stalingrad, but it's like has like 300 style special effects. Where like there's a guy with a shovel like slow motion like decapitating a German, and it's insane. Yeah, it's
2013.
crazy. Yeah, but also
Funny.
And that brings me to my other thing about the myth. I think I think most of everyone's perception of Stalingrad comes from Enemy at the Gates, which it's a fine movie visually, but like narratively it is just wrong all over the place. 'Cause none of it is right. Like they have a scene where like they're on a boat, or they're on a train, and like it's like they're being sent to like the gas chambers. But it's like okay, like people. It was really called the Great Patriotic War. Like the Germans are trying to exterminate you. Of course, you're gonna go fight them. You're not gonna be like, I don't want to go fight the people who want to exterminate me. Like that wouldn't happen. Like it's just so weird. Like the way they like, I don't know, because because the beginning of the movie, they're all being sent to the front, and they're all shaking like, oh my god, we're being sent to die. It's like they weren't like that. They were like I mean, because the Germans they were in Ukraine, like, literally exterminating people, killing people, just like burning villages to the ground. I mean. Like literally everybody in Russia was like down to fight. Like that was like very big.
They were really mad.
Yeah, I mean, because it was really like a life or death thing. It was crazy.
Yeah.
Which I think is why they need so much like respect of what they did. Because like the Germans, I mean, really, they fought literally to the Volga, which is like pretty much where the Caucasus is. That's like at least 1,000 miles of like. But yeah, it's crazy. Yeah, it's nuts.
We should do a sketch of a bunch of people, like a bunch of Russians on this boat about to beat the Nazis. Just like, how do you feel? I'm mad.
Yeah, I'm very angry. I'm very angry.
I don't know. He's like, well, you should count to 10. I should. Yeah. I don't want to, though. I kind of want to stay in this. What are you talking about?
Oh, man. No, but also, like, they were so mad, because also, like, Soviet propaganda at that time was so sick, because they had this amazing, I'm just going to paraphrase, but they had this, like, crazy poem that was like it was actually by this Jewish poet, and he had his poem for the soldiers of Stalingrad that was like, do not count days, do not count miles, do not count how many hours you have slept, count only the number of Germans you have killed. And he was just like, kill their fathers, kill their mothers, and he was like, kill every German. It's like so hardcore.
Yeah.
And I was trying to find the words, and it was like posted on this like white supremacist page of like, see how much the Jews hate us. It was like,
oh my god.
Yeah. Dude, that kind of propaganda though, like when the Germans are about like on your doorstep about to kill you, like you just go all out. It's pretty crazy.
No kidding. What is it about a German that just makes you so mad?
So mad.
It's just like the guys in the boat. Like what? I mean, sure we're gonna fight him, but you got to be cool-headed about it.
I'm gonna say I think it's those coal scuttle helmets. They really make you look evil as fuck if you wear one of those helmets. And the uniform is gray coal scuttle helmet.
Yeah.
I mean, they have like Iron Cross. They just look evil as shit.
They do.
Yeah.
They do. I don't know if yet.
But no, it's so funny though, because pretty much I blame Enemy at the Gates, because that movie propagated so many lies, because then every World War II video game is based off of that movie.
Mm-hmm.
And so then I was playing like Company of Heroes 2, and like they have this mechanic, there's a level where you have to like burn all your supplies before the Germans get there and escape. But then you have to like burn down these like shacks, and there's like people inside them. It's like they weren't doing that. They weren't just like massacring their own people.
Yeah.
I mean, they did to some degree in other ways, but not in their retreat.
Just the whole Ukraine thing of like, we need some grain, and Stalin's like, you have grain. No, we don't.
I mean, it's sort of the problem, because I definitely don't want to sound like a Soviet like apologist, because obviously they had war crimes.
Yeah.
Like I remember reading like the reason the Germans even started like incinerating the people they were killing in the first place is because in Poland they uncovered a mass grave that the Soviets had done. Of like these political prisoners the Soviets had killed, so the Germans were like, "Oh shit! If the Soviets just killed a bunch of people and then buried them, and we're gonna kill like 100 times more people, we can't have a bunch of mass graves, so everyone's gonna find them and take us to the Hague." So they were already thinking ahead. They were like, "Oh shit, we gotta get rid of these people." Like, it was,
oh my god,
dude, it's so crazy. Like that, I can't believe that happened in human history. Like, it's insane.
That's so nuts.
No, honestly, like shout out to the Soviet Union, because I mean they lost like 35 million people, and then literally like they were about to be exterminated forever, and they turned back the tide, and then fought the Germans all the way back to Germany, and then into Germany, and then to Berlin, and then Hitler killed himself. So it's pretty crazy.
Have you read any of Steven Pinker's book, The Better Angels of Our Nature?
No, I haven't read that one.
Well, it's based on a Lincoln quote, but it's about how violent crime over time has pretty much steadily gone down.
So I've heard that theory, but I'm not sure what it does. Like I'm not sure like what the usefulness of it is. Like,
I don't know. It's just it's just a way to look at history.
Yeah, I mean it's an interesting metric, but I always feel like it's interesting until something catastrophic would just happen again, and we get thrown back into like another World War II.
He was even saying that given those pogroms, it's still lower than it was.
Yeah.
But the point of the book was we're apparently doing something right. Whatever it is, we need to do more of it and find out what that is. So I think that would be the point.
True. I mean, it's definitely worth merit if it just keeps going and going. But then I guess like I guess you could say humanity is making a mistake if we go back to like 40s level crimes. That'd be horrible.
Definitely. Yeah. But I don't know.
Yeah. No, it really is nuts though. Like. Just because I was reading, there's two books I was reading. There's one guy, I just forgot his name. Well, he has a really big book called Stalingrad. Crap, it's there somewhere. I'll find it. But yeah, no, it's really good. It's actually the book that Mark reads in Peep Show season 1, like when he's sitting on Sophie. It's actually really good. And hold on, let me just find it.
What is it?
So it's just called Stalingrad, but it's kind of like about the entire thing, and then it's based on another guy, Vasily Grossman.
Yeah.
So he was this like Soviet journalist who was like attached with the forces in Stalingrad like during the whole time, and then he wrote like he wrote these two really good books about it, and then it's just like crazy because like how like okay, hold on, Stalingrad book. Sorry, I'm doing some live Googling. Oh, okay, it's Anthony Beevor, yeah.
Oh.
So he's a really good historian because he has one about Stalingrad and one about the fall of Berlin.
Yeah.
And they're both like really good in depth. Like he gets sources from like everywhere, so it's not all like one group. But like it's the one about Stalingrad's nuts because like it was just like this horrible battle. Everyone had lice apparently, and like lice is like so fucked up. I'm not sure if I talked about lice before, but like it's just like apparently like lice was the worst part because like it was so cold that like they would get lice, but the lice wouldn't do anything. And then when they would like find a fire to warm up, the lice would like activate and then start like going at it. So you would like just feel itchy all the time.
Oh shit.
Yeah, and like in the like POW camps, people would have lice and like chuck them at people. They would like chuck like balls of lice at the guards to like get their attention, which is crazy. Yeah. Yeah,
I love that. Like rolling it up like a snowball.
No, it's because they had so much lice. They had such an abundance. They had like a snowball of lice. No, you're right. Like just chucking it.
Making lice angels. And
Yeah, it was. Oh my god, it was just so horrible. And like, I mean, also there was one like very fucked up thing. Cause then Stalin had that very like infamous order. Like, I forgot what it was like formally called. Like, pretty much where no one could leave Stalingrad. Because he wanted civilians to stay there because it was like, if the civilians leave, it'll look like we're pansies.
Mm-hmm.
So we have to stay there. So he made these like poor civilians like hang out in like the basements of all these buildings, while it's like pretty much I think it was the bloodiest battle of all time.
Yeah.
To this day, so like so many people died. You can still find bones and bullets in the ground.
Oh,
it's
shit.
nuts. And like they had to 95% of all the buildings were destroyed. Like they had to just demolish the entire thing and then rebuild it. It was nuts. Like it was absolutely crazy. And also like the entire time they were bringing supplies over the Volga, and like it just constant German bombardment. It was but like the propaganda was crazy because like it's famous for the sniper wars. That's what war was famous for. So like snipers were going at it. It was all very like close quarters kind of combat. Like
close quarters sniping. That sounds rough.
Yeah, well, it was very like modern, close quarters sniping. Yeah, sorry, that was very oxymoronic. But those are two different spheres. I should have mentioned. Yeah, it's not. They're like, can we take the scopes off? This is kind of close. So I feel like I could just use my.
They're just like behind. What's that movie where there are two guys behind a barrel? They're like on the other side of a barrel. He's like.
Yeah.
That's so funny.
But it's really funny because it's been compared to lots of modern wars now. Because like it kind of set the tone for like modern warfare. Because like. Yeah, because people. I mean, the Russian and German trenches were like 10 meters away, So like you could like yell at each other, like it was so close.
You're dumb.
Yeah, really, like people.
Hey, you guys.
Oh man, but it was crazy. But also, like, I'm glad that Hitler, because it was the perfect time in the war, because Hitler was starting to go crazy, and so like all his generals were like, all right, Hitler, our Ninth Army's over there in Stalingrad. They're getting reamed. I think it's time to bring them back so we can like reinforce the Western Front. He's like, nah, they've got it. And like he literally would not believe that he was losing. So they were showing him maps and numbers, and he was like,
apparently didn't give any of his generals autonomy either, right?
No.
And he just said, you can't do anything on your own, and I'm not going to do anything.
He also would be like, I want you to die to the last man. And they were like, what was that? And he's like, yeah, just if my plan goes wrong, don't improvise, just die. And they were like, okay. And then I think
Okay.
then I'm pretty sure the general of the Ninth Army, I think he disobeyed Hitler and he didn't surrender. He was like, you know what, this is dumb. And then but yeah, it's interesting. But yeah, no, Bevor's book is cool because he has a lot of the German letters home. And like how doubtful they were just from the get go. They're like, this is dumb as hell. Like we were all gonna die. This is so stupid. Because they knew within months it was being. Because the Germans sent them there with like no winter gear. Just like the tanks, the fuel was freezing. Like the planes were bombing their own people because they didn't have enough signals. So like within months they were like, all right, we haven't taken the city over. We're gonna die here. This is. And by the end, the Russians had this loudspeaker in the city that was like this propaganda with this clock that was ticking, and then it would tick, and then it would be like every 10 seconds a German soldier dies in Stalingrad. Tick tick tick, like every 10 seconds.
That's clever.
Oh yeah, the propaganda is amazing. It's
yeah.
Sorry, I'm kind of just going on this very unfunny rant. I feel like I just
no, I think it's funny. Death is great.
Yeah,
death, suffering, it's
honestly,
all funny.
Yeah, it just amazes me how big of a battle Stalingrad was too.
Yeah.
Like, no, it's sad too because so Vasily Grossman, I think he's a really cool journalist, but it's like something that's really interesting that he was Jewish. So then Ilya Ehrenberg, who wrote that crazy anti-German poem, was Jewish. But he had this interesting thing where, like, I guess Stalin is like very anti-Semitic.
Yeah.
So Stalin hated Jews, but Jews were like during the war against Germany, they were like pretty much one of the more like really fervent groups. They were like very big in the very big in journalism and like propaganda. They were doing a lot of like really good things to the war effort, and then Stalin just like did not recognize them. So like he wouldn't invite them to like any of like the summits or like any of the big things. He would like ignore them. And then Grossman, who was like this really famous correspondent for the Eastern Front, he had this whole thing called the Black Book that was about like the German crimes against Jews.
Mm-hmm.
And then so he wrote it. It was this big project that all the Jewish writers in the Soviet Union had. And then it didn't get selected for like this award they had for like books, and it actually got like pretty much canceled. They just like denied its existence. Like they wouldn't let it get published.
Oh wow.
It's like really fucked up shit like that. It's weird.
Just because it said like retard once in the book.
Yeah. Like, not even because of the Jewish part. Yes, because Stalin didn't like. Stalin was very forward thinking.
Very PC.
Yes, yeah, he was so PC. It's like Stalin with like a Brooklyn haircut. I'm like, no, I don't like it. Yeah.
What is a Brooklyn haircut?
Like Stalin with like an undercut, like an undercut fade, and he has like a dyed mustache. Oh my god! We were talking about last night how every like Utah like hipster guy with like a puffy jacket looks like a dictator. Like they look like a Stalin, like an MP.
They do.
Yeah.
I was looking at a picture of James Joyce today actually that looks almost indistinguishable from Leon Trotsky.
Yeah. Well, also I think it's like just back then that's everyone just had that look because I think all our grandpas had that kind of underfed, gone to like high cheekbone kind of look. Like my grandpa he looks like George Orwell. Like they all have that like big mustache, cold eyes. Just like I've seen everyone starve.
Yeah. George Orwell also dealt with diseases until he died.
Oh man, you know it's funny. I have there's some books of his I don't like, and I disagree with some of his things. But like man, his life is amazing. It's pretty. Yeah, sick.
He was interesting.
I was just saying because I was reading his Spanish Civil War diaries, and like pretty sick. It's pretty cool. Like he went to Spain, got shot. He was shot through the throat.
Yeah.
By a sniper.
And it missed all the important areas, and then somebody said to him, "You're so lucky." And he said, "If I were lucky, I wouldn't have been shot in the first place."
Oh man, no. And speaking of which, like that's one more place where Stalin was and just a giant evil bastard. Because in what is it? Prior to World War II, like there was a civil war. It was Franco versus the communists. and then like Spain had their own like big homegrown anarchist movement, like homegrown leftists. And then Stalin came in and then like just pretty much just fucked it all up and like yeah, just it was awful. Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, it was messed up. It was a crazy time though. But yeah, no, definitely check out. I think it's called Vasily Grossman, like Writer at War, and that's a really good book about Stalingrad. And and he has these cool profiles about all the soldiers and like, because so much of their downtime they would just be like hanging out. So like tobacco was like a really big commodity, so they'd all just be like smoking.
Yeah.
And like,
did you
crazy.
see that World War One documentary? What's it? Peter Jackson did.
Yes.
It was
it's
so
genius. That why does no one talk about that more?
I don't know.
It's such a good movie.
It's amazing.
Yeah, it's what is it? It's and
They Shall Not Grow Old.
They shall not grow old. That's an amazing documentary.
And they're talking about how it is in the trenches when you're a young soldier, and then most of the time it's like laughing and goofing around because you have to forget. Yeah. And then it's like a boys' club. They said it was kind of fun, like summer camp.
Yeah, it was nuts because like I think in these movies you see much more of the despair and the awfulness.
Yeah.
But, like they don't account for like the 99% of downtime these soldiers had. Where they're just like hanging out and playing soccer with the Germans, and like
with the Germans.
It was that was in World War One, I think, when it was the Germans weren't bad back then. Yeah. Yeah.
That's so funny. I like that idea. Just getting like in World War II, getting up. It's like
they're still playing soccer.
You want to play around the football?
Oh man.
Yeah, all right.
Dude, it really is that like we are like the whole we are like the Are We the Baddies sketch. Like,
yeah.
It's so funny how real that is because like in Beevor's book, he has these like letters that they were sending home, and it's actually interesting. Like a lot of the Germans in the Eastern Front didn't know about the war crimes that the Nazis were doing. I guess because they were so far removed. They didn't know because they hadn't been home for like 3, so they didn't know what's going on.
Yeah.
And most of them were already in the military before, so they were just military guys who were just in there. So I guess, like, I'm definitely not sure how like culpable that makes you in being a Nazi, but a lot of them seem to be more army guys, and they weren't like party Nazis. You know what I mean? Like that's more SS, I guess. Because and it seems that there was also a big. A pretty big like kind of like infighting between the Wehrmacht and the SS in the Eastern Front. Like they were all kind of butting heads because like the SS were much more Hitler line, and it was like really weird. So the Russians were kind of just like sitting back and just letting the Nazis just devour themselves pretty much. And it was like, it was so fucked up because so Hitler like wouldn't let them leave, so that the Russians like just surrounded them in this big gap. So the Germans were just like starving and just getting lice, and the Germans would just try to like airdrop them supplies. It would just miss every time. Like it was so fucking bad. Like
that's almost funny. Just all those things that go wrong.
Oh my god. Yeah, it was also shit like the Germans. They had like very sophisticated like tanks. Like these like amazing BMW tanks. But like you literally had to have like a PhD to drive them because there was so many moving parts. Like you had to be like a fucking engineer. But so like all those guys would just get killed. So they had like these like new dudes from like Romania. And they're like, all right, drive the tank. We get like stuck in the mud. They're like, we don't know how to fix this. We don't know.
Some of those tank battle stories are really interesting. Like there's always like a big hero tank general on one side, and he's never been defeated. Yeah. And then Patton comes up against him and finally defeats him at the last minute.
Oh god, no! Or the tank stories where it's like this tank can shoot 700 meters. This tank can shoot 1,400 meters. So they just go like over here, like 700 meters extra, and just shoot them. It's just so
tank generalship was about just making sure you have a greater range. Yeah. And don't get too close.
And like pointing your tank to the right side.
Tank general.
Tank general. Yeah. Oh man, no, that's insane. But no, also Stalingrad. So now it's Volgograd, but they had this like sick like I think it's called like Mamayev Urkan or something like that, where it's this giant ass statue. It's like the.
That sounds like what Indiana Jones said when he was possessed in Temple of Doom.
Oh yeah, Mamayev
Urkan. Mamayev Urkan.
Honestly, I hold on, Mamayev Kurgan. That's what it is. Mamayev Kurgan. Yeah, it's this like gigantic statue. Yeah. Oh my god. Yeah, but I was gonna say like. Probably the most accurate Stalingrad movie. It's just called Stalingrad. It's actually a German-made movie from the 90s, but it's kind of about this small squad of Germans in Stalingrad. But it kind of shows like like kind of the despair and how like actually even that battle was, and like it was crazy.
Also, I think you said this before, but everyone watch Downfall if you haven't.
Oh yeah, Downfall.
Because if you haven't seen that, you don't know anything.
That movie, I still don't get how neo-Nazis dig the actor from that movie when like the whole movie is like,
Oh,
why
yeah.
Nazis are horrible.
Bruno, what's his name? Bruno.
I mean,
He's brilliant.
Bruno, what's his face? But his face does look like Hitler. Yeah, he's
does.
a very Hitler-y looking guy.
Yeah.
He's Austrian too, so I guess
Yeah.
maybe it's a very. I bet you there's a village in Austria where everyone just looks like Hitler.
I saw
Yeah,
another movie
yeah.
where he just plays this nice old man, and it was hard, but he's such a good actor.
Yeah.
I don't know. It was also just difficult. Like, Hitler is nice.
Yeah, that's such a good movie though. Oh my god.
Yeah.
Well, it's so fucked up, especially with like the SS at the end when they're just like I would say that's like the scariest time for a dictatorship is the last week.
Yeah.
Because everyone's just going mental. It's like the end of the world, so everyone's just like, all right, this is the last day of the Reich. I'm just gonna kill everybody and like do all my crazy Nazi stuff.
Yeah.
And like, yeah.
And then the theory is that Hitler was syphilitic, and that's why he was so crazy, right?
It was syphilis and or the meth they were giving him all the time.
Yeah.
They were just like injecting him with drugs, and he would like his doctor was doing all those weird things to him. And,
Oh,
yeah,
shit.
and pretty much like by like 1942, he's just making like shitty mistakes and like just not.
We already talked about how Lincoln might have had syphilis, right? I think we did.
Yes, I think
Yeah.
we should probably have a tally of how many world leaders we've said have had syphilis by this point.
I think only 2 right now.
It's a pretty famous, powerful man disease. Like Al
Yeah.
Capone had it.
Yeah.
All the powerful guys get it. Yeah, it's like a hubris thing. I think
What-
once you get really powerful, it's hubris. You just get syphilis. It's
What's that joke Anthony Hopkins delivers in
Yeah.
Bram Stoker's Dracula, the
Oh, I haven't
Francis Ford,
seen that.
Ford Coppola movie? That's also one of the best movies in my opinion.
Oh,
But
I
he
haven't
says, apparently civilization and syphilization
seen that.
have proceeded together.
Syphilization.
That's so fun.
That's so funny.
Yeah, and syphilization
Oh, man.
have proceeded together.
I was gonna say, what other stuff? Also, there's actually on YouTube. If you just type in the Eastern Front documentary, there's actually a really good Russian-made documentary that's been like dubbed into English.
Yeah.
It's like really good. It's like all about the Russian side of things, but like,
Mhm.
yeah, it's pretty cool. Honestly, like I just think that like Russia deserves a lot more credit in like defeating Hitler than they do. I mean, they really sacrificed like a huge. Like, just imagine, like, 1/10 of the population dies in a war
Yeah.
to save you from extermination. That's incredible. So it's, like, it's a
Yeah.
huge sacrifice.
Yeah.
I mean, also, like, just all, like, the music and, like, the chants they had. Like, they had this amazing song. It's, like, it's supposed to it's kind of this old rowing song, but they, like, made it into a... It's supposed to kind of be, like, for rowing boats across the Volga. But it's all... The lyrics are, like, heave-ho. And they had this, like, amazing, like... Just a video of like these like giant Russian dudes singing it. It's incredible. I'll tweet it.
Yeah.
It definitely just gives you like it makes you shed a tear. You're like, oh, I wish I was defending the Rudinia against the Nazis.
Yeah. I mean, there are different countries that have
Yeah.
just flowerings of literature. Like Russia's always had it,
Yeah.
and the American South for some reason, and Ireland, and
Oh, yeah,
like, there are some countries that are just very known for their literature.
Ireland is great at that.
Yeah, and I want to know what the commonality is between those that
I
makes
think
it.
it's like suffering, honestly.
Yeah.
I legitimately think because I was gonna say in the American South, that's where a lot of like very good black writers came, or
Yeah.
or because the African American writers who went to Harlem were all from the South, so I think
Right.
they carried that like
Yeah.
thing with them. Yeah, I
I
think
think-
it's like pain and suffering just makes you like a
And then there were a lot
ridiculously
of
good artist.
there were a lot of just white Southern writers after the Reconstruction
Oh,
who came
sure.
up, and they were extremely good.
Is
Like
it antebellum? No, ante's before. Or,
Yeah.
Pre-bellum is before.
yeah,
Civil
antebellum would also be before, I think.
Yeah. Which war though, man?
The Civil.
The Civil.
And then they were like, ooh, and then their children were like, well, we did suck, and then they wrote good literature.
It's funny because Civil War actually makes it sound like a very nice war because it was a civil.
I know.
War. Yeah.
Yeah, that's
It should have been like the uncivil war.
that's the old joke.
Oh, is it?
That's
Damn it.
that's the old joke. They're like in like black and white in the 40s. There are
Yeah.
jokes about that. It's like, don't know quite why they called it the Civil
Yeah,
War.
yeah. Oh, dude, I fucking love like there's this documentary series that the Thames television made called the World at War, which is also a very good Stalingrad episode.
Mm.
But it's so great because it was in the 70s, so like tons of these old lords are still alive, and it's like, yes, I do not know what we were thinking. We were all young lads at the time,
Yeah.
and then like it cuts like a ship sinking or something, and you're like whoa, all right.
I
yeah.
love those.
Yeah.
That
We were were foolish boys. We were. We didn't know.
Just all interviews with people back then are funny. I don't
It's
know
like
what.
Lord Byron, whatever, and then he's just like, it was a paltry disagreement. It turned into a massive war.
Lord Byron,
Yeah.
like the poet.
Yeah.
I'd like to see him like in charge of World War II. He was like, what I believe in is our great shows of passion.
Yeah.
So I thought that if we were violent, just at any point, it would be good because that is
Just that style of talking, I love it. I love that because especially in the Peter Jackson one, that's how they all talk. Like, well, the Germans were good chaps. They were. I didn't know why we were fighting them. Like, yes, that's what I want more of that. I want more.
I didn't know why we were fighting.
Yeah,
but
just like
there we were.
I feel like we literally could make our own documentary. We just make it all up. It would sound real if we just said stuff like that. Yeah.
There's such funny anecdotes from that too. It's like,
Yeah.
so I felt my hand felt very cold at one point, and I looked down, and my last three fingers were gone. I didn't feel any pain.
Yeah, dude. Probably the scariest part of the documentary is how nonchalant they are, because they're talking about how like the mud would freeze in the trenches, and like every single person would just get frostbite. And like, they were like, yeah, it just happens.
It happens.
No big deal.
And then I think part of it is trying not good British phlegm and trying not to show that you were downtrodden at that point.
Yeah, well, that's like I think that's what I think I love the British guys in that movie because they actually they humanized the Germans so much. They were like they really admired the Germans, I think, and they were like, you know what, like it was cool that they understood that the German fighters were just like other working class dudes in their country, and they had a lot in common, and like it was kind of cool. Mm-hmm. Well, especially because World War One, it's like there was no really moral cause. They were all like, "Why are we here? Like this is kind of weird." It's like your king is cousins with my king. I don't know why we're doing this.
There's stories of propaganda in World War II and what they would say about the Japanese to the American soldiers. And they're like, you can tell, like, it's telling the difference between Chinese, which were good, and Japanese, which were bad. And it's like, you can tell by the pubic hair. Apparently this happened. Like, the Japanese have pubic hair that is very wiry. But the Chinese pubic hair is very straight and soft.
I saw this. I think I saw the same poster where, like, they had, like, the figure of the two, and it's just like, you see that the Chinese man is more subservient and hard and loyal, while the Japanese is more of a scoundrel. It was just like, so fucked
and they're just,
oh my god.
I don't know.
Yeah, it's so fucked up.
Like, they make them look like villains. They're just hand-drawn animations.
Oh my god.
And they're all just grumpy and...
No, it's crazy. Like, I saw a Tintin, and like the Japanese were taking over China, and like Herge, the Tintin guy, like he drew the Chinese as like 4 foot tall, like basically just goblins. That's what he drew them as. With like, and they had really small eyes, and then the Japanese were like these tall people with like their teeth were like their entire mouth. Like it was insane. It was so bad. I was like, holy shit, man. This is
man.
Like, yeah.
I mean, the Japanese had been imperialist for a while.
I thought you were going to say, and the Japanese did have big teeth, though. They did have, no.
Their pubic hair, not so good.
I was going to say, that Thames television series is really good, because it actually starts with the Japanese, because it goes from 1933 onwards. So it's kind of cool, because because no one even talks about how bad the Japanese were. They were like, oh my god.
The whole rape of non-king thing is just
I mean,
so
how big
nuts.
I mean, they had been like annihilating the Pacific for like 10 years before.
What is it with island countries and becoming the hugest, like Venice? And
I was gonna say, I think it's because islands have boundaries. Like, there's not enough of us. We gotta go take over those islands. And especially in the Pacific, because every island is like so close. You're like, I see more islands. Let's go get those islands.
Venice was terrorizing everyone, and Britain and Japan, and just.
Yeah, I think it really is that like guns, germs, and steels kind of theory, where it's like if you're landlocked. And it's one, if you're landlocked, and two, you have a system that always has to grow. Mm-hmm. Then inevitably you'll just start killing people to take their shit. So it's just like
and then one facet of fascism called autarky is supposed to be pretty common to it, where the country is supposed to be completely self-sufficient. So in order to not to trade with any other countries, they have to like take them over.
Yeah, exactly. I've done that in Civilization, where I'm like, I don't want your gold anymore. I'll just take you, and then I can use you to produce stuff. Yeah,
autarky,
God, it's fucked up. It's funny that Civilization makes you understand fascism a lot more, because you're like, I get it now. I'll do it. Yeah,
Orwell said to understand fascism, you have to have a little of it in yourself.
In yourself.
He said that. And then he was talking about that, I think, when he was talking about no longer being a policeman in Burma because he felt himself becoming a sadist.
Oh, was that in like the killing of an elephant or something? Or?
I don't think so. I think that's
okay.
but
Yeah.
I think he talked elsewhere about leaving because he was becoming a sadist.
That's interesting. That's good for him for doing
Yeah.
that. Yeah, that's cool.
He educated himself out of a lot of shit. Like he was brought up to be like anti-Semitic and racist and all this,
Yeah.
and he educated himself out of that. But he kept hating the gays.
You can't. He gets all those boxes never get ticked. There's always one
Yeah.
they didn't do. Yeah.
Yep.
Same with I think Che Guevara was was very homophobic too. It was weird. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was,
He also didn't like a lot of people to be alive. He hated it when they were alive.
Yeah, but that does make you a very effective revolutionary.
Yeah.
Like, yeah.
Yes,
like,
it does.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway, no. Man, I've never been hogging the
You're good.
app. You want to go for yours?
Well, I knew mine would be shorter. I just wanted to talk about James Joyce and all he was and what he did. And,
Oh hell yeah! James, that's a good one, man.
yeah, Jimmy Joyce.
Jimmy Joyce.
As they called
What
him.
year was he? This is always good to know, just for the gaming.
Oh yeah, he was born in 1883, I think, and then he died in 1941.
Oh, he's more recent. I thought he
Yeah.
died before the 20th century. So.
No,
Oh, okay.
no, he was more recent, but he was around during World War II, and he was pretty active in writing till he died. I mean, he finished Finnegan's Wake, which we'll talk about, but
Oh yeah.
and then he just fucking died. So yeah, he was born into a pretty affluent family. His dad had just inherited a lot of money, and then he was really affectionate towards his son because, but from the time he was a kid, his dad was like, "This kid's a genius. I know it. He's gonna go on to do great things." And they had, get this, 10 children, and those were the ones that survived childbirth, that survived infancy.
Wow, that's 10 out of like 20.
Yeah, 10 out of, I don't know how many
God.
died, but it's, yeah.
Whoa, that's a persistent. How do you make your poor wife do that? They're just keep getting them and they die with this
The fella liked sex, something he passed on to his son. We'll talk about that too.
Jesus.
But
Good on you, G.
yeah, so that happened.
Yeah.
John James was the father, and then he was he inherited all that money, and then I can't remember what he did for a living, but then he just started drinking and then just
wasting
wasted it all. Yeah, he mortgaged all the money away.
Oh, Jesus.
And then they were going to be pursued by creditors, and James Joyce's childhood was pretty good apparently. Like before all the money was lost, and they had this warm house, and everyone was nice to each other and laughing, and they just had a great family.
Much.
And then the family had to run from creditors everywhere, so the dad was lugging 10 kids and his wife every place.
Jesus.
And they'd moved so many times.
It's so funny how dark alcoholism was back then. Like really, it really would destroy your life. I mean, it still does, but like
yeah,
the debtors come after you and stuff.
I mean, there's nowhere for women to go back then. A lot of the
That's
time.
true.
Too.
Like, yeah, it sucks because like if your husband's deadbeat, you can't leave.
Yeah,
you just gotta stay.
You're just
with
fucked.
You're
just fucked. What you can't take all your kids and leave in the car.
Get a
What
divorce.
car?
Yeah, there's no divorce laws. They're like, get out of here, you woman. Yeah,
You're a woman.
Yeah.
And then they were lugged around everywhere, and then Joyce went to school went to a Jesuit school, a really nice Jesuit school, which was very expensive, and it was called like the Eton of Ireland.
Oh.
Yeah.
It's pronounced Eton.
Yeah,
I always thought it was Eton or something.
I don't know. It could be.
I've heard of that school. It's like the nice prep school.
Yeah,
for
big
kids.
prep school, and they call it a public school in England. What we would call a private school, they call a public school.
That's funny.
And then and that so many people went to Eton or Eton in England.
Yeah, no. In Roald Dahl books, it's always like a running joke where like it's like in Roald Dahl books, like the most evil character always goes to Eton.
Yeah.
It's like really funny. Yeah.
Like something like every prime minister has gone there.
Yeah, it's like pretty much every tawdry, like dry speaking British person has gone there. Yeah.
Like that. That's where you get you don't get power in England unless you've gone there. Basically, yeah.
It's where they put something up your ass that makes you into a crazy
well, it's just the name also. It's just the class system and the name. It just cements your class. Orwell went there too.
God, the baby toys must be in like Latin. Everything's in Latin. Yeah. You just start you learn Roman numerals like first. Yeah.
That's so funny. I was reading something about Shakespeare also, where it was Wilder Ant, I think, where he talks about Shakespeare being such a good writer because his mind wasn't cluttered by Greek and Latin, which I love.
That's hilarious.
Yeah.
Yeah, he wasn't always trying to like do this weird. Yeah.
Yeah, he just said he just wrote good things. He didn't have to think about but the Greeks and this.
Yeah, seriously, he was like Kurt Cobain, where like Kurt Cobain wasn't trying to master the guitar; he was trying to make a good song. You know?
Yeah.
That's, Anyway, sorry.
He was also really good at guitar, Kurt Cobain.
True.
They're recordings of him doing these intricate blues songs, and they're really good.
Yeah.
But he just didn't do that.
Yeah,
for
because
his
everyone's
writing.
like, he just. Well, people probably had the same thing with Shakespeare, like, he just does power chords. It's not special. It's like, no, he knows how to be a writer. He just breaks the rules.
And sometimes he was pretty formulaic. And he like Shakespeare liked to take stories from other places. He just would like thieve stories and make them good.
Yeah.
Then. Anyway.
Anyway, sorry. Back to prep school.
Yeah, prep school. So Joyce went there, and then he was taken out eventually because his dad was poor and he couldn't pay for it, and they also had to leave. And so at that college, apparently there's still a £25 debt.
No one's paid his debt yet.
No.
They just kept it.
Yeah, they just kept it. Like, I don't think they'll let anyone pay it.
It's so funny. That's great.
Yeah.
$25 debt.
There's a £25 debt left for John Joyce.
That's so funny.
That he hadn't paid.
What a deadbeat fucking loser.
Also to tie back into Kurt Cobain's only guitar lesson he never paid for. So, anyway.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay, that's so funny.
Yeah.
I'm just gonna start not paying my tickets, so everyone will think I'm a good legend.
Yeah. So what happened? So they were just dragged around every place, and then his dad had enough connections to get him into Breverton College, which was another Jesuit college, and he actually went there for free because his dad was a charming rogue or something.
Oh, okay.
And he loved it there, and he excelled. Of course, he showed a penchant for language, and he would just master languages just like that.
Wow.
Like Finnegan's Wake, which is his last book, is so difficult to read because you have to know like 5 languages to get it all.
And dialects, I imagine, right? So he knew like all these like Celtic and
and there would be like trilingual puns.
Wow.
And quadrilingual puns in
Holy
Finnegan's
shit.
Wake. Like he never lets a clause alone. He just says like, and then a bad wind came, and that's supposed to be. He was just joking because the Turkish word for wind is bad.
Yeah, bud. It's in Persian, yeah.
Bud, yeah.
Bud. That's so. He knew that.
Yeah, and he just
shit.
mastered all these
What a
languages.
genius,
yeah,
man.
he was a complete and utter genius. Like
That's incredible.
the biggest genius in literature by far, I think.
That's insane. Well, it's actually because Finnegan's Wake is a big ass book too.
Yeah, it's a big book,
yeah.
and he dictated it.
Wow.
He didn't write it himself, most of
Wow.
it, because he was fucking blind when he was dying. So he would just he was really old, and then he would dictate it to the daughter he had who wasn't crazy.
Jesus.
And then
This guy's life is insane.
Oh, it's fucked up. It's fucked up. There are a lot of similarities between him and Mark Twain, actually.
Yeah.
As far as their life goes, but I'll talk about that a different time. So yeah, he was head boy. He was elected head boy. It's called something else in Ireland, but he was elected head boy a few times. And he was supposed to be just the cheeriest, brightest young man.
Yeah.
And he was just so happy all the time. And because of that, people just wanted to be around him, and they were all happy. And then his brother, Stanislaus, I think, was his name, was always kind of jealous of that and wrote things like, he's a genius, but he will not be loved despite his genius. and then he was just friends with everybody at school, so you can imagine Stanislaus like
Stanislaus, that's a great name for a jealous brother. I like that. Wait, was James the oldest of the siblings?
Yeah.
Oh, okay,
yeah, the oldest son anyway.
Oh, I see. Okay.
So because of that, and because he showed so much promise, their dad just lavished praise and affection and stuff on him. Like there's a recording of one of the sisters saying that we were deprived of things so that it could be given to Jim.
Oh my god! Well, also it's such a deadbeat dad thing to do.
Yeah.
Where he's just like taking like the younger kid's Lego. He's like, you didn't get an A, he got an A. Take it, yeah. I don't want it, Dad. Take it. Yeah.
Yeah, apparently they had a great relationship.
Damn, Maybe this is an Irish thing.
Perhaps.
Yeah.
But his childhood was very colored by this guy Parnell, who was a politician who ended up. He got in trouble because he was living with and fucking some other politician's wife.
Oh.
And then because it was very Catholic out there, they turned on him. The populace turned on him.
Yeah. Well, it does explain the 10 kids.
Yeah.
That's very Catholic.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And then everyone turned on this Parnell guy, and then his family, Joyce's family, would have arguments at the dinner table about it, and their family was split, and like the mom hated the Parnell guy, and the dad loved him, and there's a passage in Portrait of the Artist as a Young Man about that. But Joyce was just obsessed with that for the rest of his life. Like later on,
the Parnell scandal.
The Parnell scandal, and then how he was supposed to save Ireland, and then it's a Bill Clinton situation, I guess.
Oh, interesting.
Like people were like, he was gonna bring balance to the party. He was Darth Vader.
Yeah,
you were supposed to bring balance to the party.
I mean, his writing is so interesting too, because I feel like he's one of the first modern writers to like really talk about like a lot of things that nobody was really addressing with like people or people's characters and stuff. But his characters are always like very realistic.
They are very realistic.
Really cool.
I mean, but what he did was kind of so before that there was the realist movement, which did that. And he was actually kind of reacting against that a little bit. After that came the symbolist movement, with people who were like, well, truth should be in objects and things, and everything should be metaphorical and symbolic. And then that's Edgar Allan Poe. And then Baudelaire kind of took that up, and then he kind of created with some other people the idea of the symbolist movement. And then Joyce wanted to kind of join the symbolist movement with the realist movement. So that's what he
That
did.
explains his writing. That's why it's so like... Because it's very direct, but then it's like just goes in circles. You don't know what's going on.
Yeah.
But yeah.
And then just little objects have significance, like the three fucking... I can't remember. It was like, I think it's 3 eggs at the beginning of Ulysses, supposed to symbolize the Trinity. And it only does that. It's not some like crazy deeper meaning. It symbolizes the Trinity because Joyce just wanted to fucking make fun of Catholic liturgy.
Eggs,
Catholic liturgy. So they're above these eggs, and they're like like the God, the Father, and the Holy Ghost. They're cracking each egg or something.
No, because so far I've only read Dubliners, which I feel like is like it's so small, but I definitely want to read like Ulysses, but I've heard it's like it's a puzzle. I mean they literally teach like a semester course on how to read it.
Right. I'm still going through Ulysses, but they say not to read it with a key, which I've been doing. But they say just to read it once all the way through, just not understanding some of the shit. So I'm probably just going to start it over and do that because it's such a grueling process. Yeah. Like with all of the keys they have for it, and like this symbolizes this, and he didn't really want a sense of place at the beginning, so he didn't describe this tower, which actually exists where this meeting takes place. And then you can see pictures of like the tower where it took place. Ulysses takes place in Dublin in one day, and it's it takes place on June 16th, 1904, which was the day he first got a hand job from someone who wasn't a hooker.
Jesus Christ!
You're just a lewd man. Yeah, but he went to Breverton College. That he went and got a blowjob from a hooker, and wrote about it in Portrait of the Artist. And he said, "And I felt nothing, but it was smoother than sin. It was Dude. Darker and lower than the smoothness of sin," or something.
It's so weird knowing that it's literally more than 100 years old.
I know.
That happened more than 100 years ago.
Yeah, he was just he was a modern man, I tell you. Yeah, and then
he's just writing about getting head.
No, I remember the passage. He said he said something like it was darker than this. I felt something darker than the swoon of sin, and nothing but the soft pressure of her mouth. And
I swear to God, the Irish can't enjoy anything. They get so guilty. They have to write a whole book about it just to feel better. Yeah.
And then he did go to confession right after that. And then he swore to the confessor that he was gonna be nice, and then he was like, "I'll just give my soul to God," and he cried and cried, and then he went back and he just kept fucking hookers.
He just can't stop walking around Dublin getting depressed.
And then he eventually lost his faith, which is why he was no longer in good standing with the college at some point.
Yeah, that's so funny.
Because he, they thought he had lost his faith, and he definitely had. And there were rumors going around that he was doing all this shit. but he just liked sex.
He was just down.
Yeah.
Oh,
and then
God.
but he always was really lonely. And there's this passage in Portrait of the Artist which is really beautiful about him being on the beach and seeing this beautiful woman. And then he said, the pigeon-like swell of her pale bosom, and then he wants to love so badly.
That's a good metaphor. I like that.
Yeah.
I'm gonna go into something like you're very pigeon-like with your with those tits over there.
Yeah, those tits over there.
That's such a good image, like puffing them out.
Yeah,
That's hilarious.
it's beautiful, and then it's such a gorgeous passage, and he talks about. I mean, it's ogling, that whole passage.
Yeah.
But it just communicates his loneliness so well,
Oh,
and that's why it was so impactful to him when he finally met Nora Barnacle, which is her actual name.
Barnacle?
Nora Barnacle.
Did he find her on the side of a ship like those other women? Yeah. Jesus.
Well, she did kind of latch onto him.
Yeah, Nora Barnacle.
Yeah, that was her actual name. But she had come to Dublin to escape. She'd come from another village in Ireland.
Dude, his life is like a James Joyce book.
You know,
Crazy. Yeah, like none of it makes sense.
Yeah.
I don't get it.
And then, so she left an abusive uncle, who she lived with, to come to Dublin, and he met her. And then he was like, he just basically went right up to her and said, "God damn!" And then she.
Oh my God, this is the horniest guy in history.
Yeah, he said, "You're really attractive," and then I guess he was forward, but she put up with it because she was just lonely. She just left her town.
Oh, so it's like two broken people finding each other. Just
Yeah.
kind of, okay, I like that.
And then they made a date, and then she didn't keep it, and he just like stayed there forever and ever. He was like, "Okay."
Oh
okay.
my
And then he
God.
like wrote her a letter, and he said I I looked at the back of a red-headed woman and decided that that it was not yours, and that her head was not yours, and so I left eventually, and then they went on another date. I mean, they made another date which she came to, and they just walked around Dublin, and that was June 16th, 1904. And then so the passage they took through Dublin is rumored to be the passage Leopold Bloom takes on that day in Ulysses.
Oh, that's incredible.
Yeah. And he got like newspapers from the day way later when he wrote Ulysses, and just like a horse race with a horse winning, he put that into Ulysses.
Wow, so it's very biographical.
Yeah, but it's just one day.
Wait, so have people like preserved those? That'd be so cool to like track down.
Yeah, I think so.
That's so cool.
Yeah,
oh
but
my God, that's awesome.
They know what newspaper he looked at just based on the things he included in Ulysses.
That's amazing.
I've
got to read that. Well, okay, so I was going to ask, like, as like a very entry level literature person myself, like, what's the easiest way to get into the old James Joyce? Like
Dubliners, like you did.
Dubliners, then go into Ulysses, or do Finnegan's Wake?
No.
Do Ulysses then?
Do it in chronological order.
Like Portrait, and then.
Yeah.
Okay.
The Dubliners, Portrait, Ulysses. I haven't read all of Ulysses yet, even.
Oh, okay, yeah. Because Portrait sounds. Is Portrait just about him as a young man? Is that like?
Yeah.
Is that that sounds salacious. I'm down.
Yeah, it's just him as a young man. It's interesting. That's a beautiful book. That's one of my favorite books. I actually just keep it with me everywhere.
No, I want to read it now because it seems like one of those books you're supposed to read while you're young. So you're like, I'm inspired now. It's good. Yeah.
It's like that. I mean, I
it's like Catcher in the Rye.
I have a really small copy that I keep in my coat, and then when I'm sad, I can just break it out.
That's so cool. We should get more pocketbooks. So just like go to a bar and take out like a nice play and start reading it. Very
I'm actually gonna go get it from my coat.
All right, go for it. Wait.
You can cut this out later.
No, we'll keep this. I'll put like a image over this. It'll all work.
Yeah, man. But it's just such a beautiful book, and it starts with him as a little kid, and it's from the kind of the style of a little kid at the beginning.
This is a short one. Okay.
Yeah, it's a regular sized novel, like 300 pages, but this is just a really small edition.
That's cool.
And then it starts, once upon a time, and a very good time it was, there was a moo cow coming down along the road, and this moo cow that was coming down along the road met a nice-ins little boy named Baby Taku. His father told him that story. His father looked at him through a glass. He had a hairy face. He was Baby Taku. The moo cow came to. It's so cute.
This is so adorable.
I know.
But it kind of matures.
Yeah, it matures throughout
That's
the book.
so cool. What a fucking genius.
Yeah.
Damn, that's cool.
Yeah, and then later on, he's talking about kissing, and then he said, "Kissing was when my mother planted her lips upon me and made a sucking sound." And then he wrote, "Why did people do that with their two faces?" Which I think is the cutest passage in all
With
of
their two faces.
Why did people do that with their two faces?
Oh, man, this is some like every line is so
Every
nice.
line is gorgeous.
This is great. On the desk, he read the word fetus cut several times in the dark stained wood. This is a great, like, out of context.
I know. But it gets really, and then he becomes kind of a pedantic kid who goes to college, so it gets really involved later on. And
But it's cool because it's like self-aware. Like,
I know.
So that's cool.
Yeah, and that he stood still in deference to their calls and parried their banter with easy words. How characterless they looked. Shuley with his deep unbuttoned collar, Ennis without his scarlet belt with the snaky clasp, and Connolly without his Norfolk coat with the flapless side pockets. It was a pain to see them, and a sword-like pain to see the signs of adolescence that made repellent their pitiable nakedness. Just
Damn.
shit like that. It's the whole book is that poetic.
I'm gonna read that.
The whole damn thing, and that's the reason it's one of my very favorite books.
No, this really is the book. This is how you should get girls. Like, you should go to like a nice coffee shop, like just whip this out and get like with your latte, and then just like read it with the spine like this, just yeah. And then be like, oh, they're like, what are you reading? Oh, just this, just my book. Yeah, it's very good. Would you? Yeah,
it's beautiful, and they're there's such a. I mean, it takes the loneliness away from you, this book, because it's able to make just everything so warm, and the affection he has for these characters and the fullness with which he communicates their humanness is so intense.
Yeah, he's very good at that. He's very good. Like his characters are like ridiculously good.
They are, nice. And that's what makes it so beautiful to be in it. It just feels homey to me.
It's like you're it's like you're living it. You're like, it's so nice. You're just living a childhood.
Yes.
Which is what we all want.
I know.
All we want is nostalgia to go back to our nice, warm mother's embrace.
Yeah. Somebody said that the point of all art is to make it so that you notice more things in life.
Yeah.
And this book does that for me more than any other book, I think.
This is a very unintellectual reference, but in Ratatouille.
That's the best Pixar, I think.
Oh, it's that is like in my top 5 movies. Like,
so good.
When he eats the Ratatouille and like gets transported back to his childhood, like and he's like not bitter anymore. That's like my favorite scene.
It's beautiful.
And he starts I was crying pretty hard. That was so great.
That also has it's so funny, that movie.
I love it.
I just like the nebbishy redheaded guy.
Yeah.
Like, so let's do this thing.
I know. They really were like, if we could just put Woody Allen in a movie and not have it be Woody Allen.
Yeah.
It
would be this man.
Oh, man.
Yeah. So, James Joyce meets Nora Barnacle, and then they get together, and he doesn't marry her until their old age because he's against marriage. Because he just thinks religion and government shouldn't be a part of it. Oh,
okay. So here's one. What was James Joyce's fault? Did he hate any people that was bad? He seems he was pretty chill. He's
very chill. He didn't seem like a very prejudiced man. If he didn't write about it.
Yeah, I've never heard of him being an outspoken anything. He was kind of just like, just did his thing. That's kind of nice. That's very rare for a writer.
It is. And he had a lot of ideas about how literature should be and the difference between. He had a different definition of pornography than we have today.
Oh, really?
He thought pornography was literature that basically wants something from you as opposed to giving something to you. And then
so he was just a completely different definition. He just like he's been like gratuitous writing where it's like
where it's definitely written so that you give money to them or something else. That's pornography. He said real art shouldn't be that way. It should just exist in and of itself.
Well, I think my like English teacher in high school told us like Dickens at some point like they were paying him like by the word, so he's just like trying to think of like ways to extend his sentences.
Of course,
like, which I feel like he would hate that.
And that gives the illusion of him just writing for himself and for humanity, but I don't like Dickens that much.
I've read Hard Times and Great Expectations. Yeah, and like Hard Times was a slog. I was not.
I read the beginning of Hard Times and I loved it until he started getting into the characters, and his characters are just so uninteresting.
Yeah, exactly.
And then his narrative though is beautiful. Some of the best narrative I've ever seen.
It's cool because he's cool because he focused on like the working class and like the struggles. He's just bad at it. Like he's just not.
I mean, he just wasn't that interested in human interaction a lot of the time. Most of his books were satires.
Yeah, but like James Joyce is actually very good at those things.
Yes, very good at those things. Different kind of writer.
Yeah.
I mean, there's usually a difference between a kind of technician and a writer that takes what these technicians have done and makes it into something perfect. But Dickens was more of a technician because he played a lot with essayist omniscient style is what it's called. Omniscient style is where you're, like Tolstoy, where you're just this intelligence. Yeah, you can go in and out of heads and things like that. Yeah. But essayist omniscient is when that happens. But then Jane Austen does this really well too. But and Gogol best of all, I think. But they come in and they like comment on what's happening. I was like, and that's kind of stupid. And they're like the character did this, and that's kind of dumb.
They have like more opinion. It's like if God was narrating stuff. Yeah. It's funny because then like Dostoevsky's a lot like Joyce because he kind of stays in the character's head. He doesn't really leave.
He does
at all. Like you're just always in that guy's brain, and then you never really see anyone else's perspective.
He's pretty different from Joyce in that his stuff is very. There's not a lot of sensuousness or carnality to it.
That's true.
I mean, it's more just ideas that are floating around. Joyce almost abhorred ideas in his books. And then his characters have ideas, but it's not about that. In Dostoevsky, it's usually about that.
Yeah, and Joyce is credited with like stream of consciousness. Isn't he? He was kind of a main.
He got it from a guy named Dujardin, who wasn't a very well-known author, but that guy played with stream of consciousness a lot. I mean, it had happened through literature, but Joyce was the first person to take it really, really seriously.
And like just really like use it as a tool. Yeah.
Yeah, and
cool.
And then he played with form a lot too in that way where. Ulysses was great because it combined realism with symbolism, and that he was moving. It was just characters like moving from place to place, and things happen so slowly through it. And then like it's just somebody's thoughts as they're like going to the restroom, or moving from one coffee shop to another, or things like that. But it has all these like half thoughts and these strange just. Impressions that come through.
Well, someone said he had this like objective when he wrote it, where he wanted a book that was like had so many layers and like so many things. Like he was like he had this like goal in the back of his head when he was writing Ulysses, to just make it like as layered and complicated as possible. Yeah.
Yeah, but he did that not so that you'd necessarily get all those things, but so that you'd. I mean, this is how I see it. So that you'd get the impression that that this is a real like stream of thought.
Right.
Like you don't necessarily have to understand everything to get the idea of the book.
That's kind of cool. So he's not trying to confuse you. He's just trying to immerse you.
Yeah.
That's really cool. I feel like you could like that. I've seen like people use that as strategy too. Like with like The Sopranos, there's like lots of different threads, but like those don't matter. Those are just there to simulate the real world. Kind of. It's like that's interesting.
Absolutely, and that's called verisimilitude.
Right, that's what that means. Verisimilitude.
Yeah, just like communicating truthfulness, realness, and that start you get when you're like, oh, life is really like that. Oh,
that's always my favorite type of writing too. Like in like everything. Yeah, same with comedy. I love comedy where it's like this is like real.
Yeah, that's what usually characterizes good writing for me. Yeah. I mean, it has other things in it that makes it make it beautiful, but that kind of perceptiveness where it just cuts to you.
Well, hey, damn.
Yeah, and then it's also called mimesis a lot of the time, which is, I mean, like mime comes from that. It's like just mimicking something, mimicking something. You can mimic real life. You can do, but that's kind of associated. I don't think that's quite the same thing because that has some different implications. But Joyce was.
Damn.
He did some extremely beautiful things, and because he thought he had an idea, and he was like, "It would be cool if that happened." Okay, I'll do it. And
I'll just make it happen.
A lot of people will come up with things like that, and then they're like, "Well, it'd be really hard." But he actually just decided to do that
and spent 10 years on it. Yeah, that's crazy.
Which brings us to another definition of genius. Is it supposed to be genius implied or used to imply that person just could never stop, like always working. A lot of ambition is supposed to be a type something that characterizes genius.
Kind of
guy. Yeah. Genius was supposed to combine that with actual talent, and then.
What's the Einstein quote with it's like the inspiration and perspiration like that? Yeah.
And then.
Damn.
So Joyce started getting things published while he was still in college because he was amazing. And then that finally, when he got something published and his family read it, they're like, "Oh, okay, I guess you can be a writer." Like, all right, 'cause it was amazing.
Once again, the Irish family who just has like no faith in their kid.
Yeah.
They're like, why don't you just go work?
Why don't you just
like,
go
yeah,
work?
Yeah.
Yeah, but then he wrote a thing, and they were all just like,
I suppose.
Oh.
Yeah, I suppose you can have a.
"Oh
you can be a
shit!
writer. Yeah.
All right."
Oh my god.
Yeah.
I love them.
And then, so he was kind of a self-exile from Dublin because he hated the church.
Oh, okay.
And then he left Ireland because he hated the church and he hated all the guilt and all that.
Yeah.
So he really did call himself a self-exile. Then he left to Paris, where he was for a while, and he was really poor because there wasn't a lot to go around there.
He's probably there during the whole intellectual era with all the folks over there.
During, I mean, it was before like the classic expatriate stage with Fitzgerald and all those people.
Like Hemingway and all those folks. Oh,
it was way before that. It was about 20 years before.
Oh shit! So he was like on the ground floor before the hipsters came in.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, and so he was just in Paris because he wanted to be elsewhere. And then he visited a lot of brothels and went to a lot of bars.
Of course
and shit.
he did, right?
And then he got a telegraph that's just your mom's dying, come home, love dad. So he went back, and then just watched his mom fucking die, and then tried to be in Dublin, and then couldn't make it work. He lived with this rich guy in that tower that's at the beginning of Ulysses that you can go visit.
He lived in a tower?
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Mm-hmm.
My dream is to be an artist who lives in like a clock tower somewhere. Yeah, that's so cool.
The Montaigne Joyce.
Yeah.
Yeah. Ideal, but so he left there. He hated Dublin. He was like, I can't be here. But then he wrote about it for his whole life. So
yeah, he's like very attached to it. Damn.
So
it's because where all his formative years were. That's what you're gonna write about. Yeah.
But he got together with Nora. They went to Switzerland so he could teach. And there are interviews with the kids who he taught in Switzerland, and they were like, he was just obsessed with this Parnell guy and how he fucked a lady. And he kept talking about it, and then his way of teaching them English was to teach.
That was like 20 years ago.
I know.
Yeah, this Parnell guy. It's crazy.
Yeah, his way of teaching English apparently was to teach them Irish history in English. So
what a mensch, dude! That's so funny.
He was still just really pissed.
That seriously is like if we became teachers and you start talking to like first graders about Bill Clinton, and you're like, yeah, then Monica Lewinsky like blew up, and I'm like, whoa, like Jesus, yeah.
But yeah, he was. It was so funny.
So funny.
Yeah, and then he wrote Ulysses, and that took him a while, and then we already talked about Ulysses. So then he had a bunch of kids, and then one went insane. Like his daughter he thought she was just eccentric for a while. Then she went insane, and it really fucked him up. It really fucked him up. Like he watched it happen, and he did everything he could to try to cure it. But
it's like back then, there's just no mental health care or anything. Yeah.
I mean, he did everything he could before sending her to a sanitarium, but eventually that's what he had to do.
That's sad.
And it just screwed him up for his whole life. So he threw himself into Finnegan's Wake. He just threw himself into it.
Yeah.
And if you read that book, it's so stocked with linguistic genius that it's unintelligible.
Wow.
Like Nabokov, even, who probably seconds Joyce in linguistic intelligence, at least in English literature, says that book is a cold mess. But it's
just too heaped with.
Yeah.
Damn, dude, that's a set. Yeah. I'm not sure why it always has to end so grim for all these people.
It does.
It's kind of sad.
But I mean, it's brilliant. Finnegan's Wake. I mean, sentence by sentence, it would take like forever to parse like a little bit of it.
Damn.
And it's just so funny too. The cadence of the book just makes you laugh. It's so silly, and he wrote it in such a way that it's just the silliest thing, and it's just like twiddly tum toes is one of the words in the book.
Jesus.
That I remember, twiddly tum toes, and just such a goofy, childlike exercise in dream logic. It was supposed to be like, whereas Portrait of the Artist was completely in the real world, and Ulysses was kind of between the dream world and this.
This is completely dream world.
Finnegan's Wake was supposed to be just in the dream world.
Did he die like right afterwards, or
pretty soon? I think.
Soon?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah. It probably just consumed him. He's like, I'm done now.
Yeah. Joseph Campbell. You know him?
I've heard of him.
Hero with a Thousand Faces guy. He talks about. He kind of carried on Jung's idea of the collective unconscious and why different myths recur throughout different civilizations you could never have met. And he wrote a book kind of comparing mythologies called The Hero with a Thousand Faces, which is really good. Some of his ideas get kind of too, they seem too convenient for me, but really smart guy, very good speaker. But he did a lecture which you cannot find. I don't know why you can't find it, but you can't, called Wings of Art, I think, about Joyce. It's all about Joyce.
Oh.
And then he talks about Joyce all the time in Here with a Thousand Faces too. But he talks about how he thought that it was completely apparent to Joseph Campbell that Joyce was trying to do a Dante-like tetralogy and a trilogy. And
so like it would be Ulysses, Finnegan's Wake, and something else.
Something else. Yeah. He thought that Ulysses was kind of his Paradiso, and then Finnegan's Wake was going to be the Purgatorio, and whatever next book was going to be the Inferno. And I can't even imagine what that fucking would have been.
Well, it'd be like past dream state. It'd be crazy. It'd be like it'd be like fucking like there's like layers to it. It's like divine. Just magical. That's crazy. Well, that's a shame he died. He didn't live very long.
No,
that's sad.
Not really. I mean, yeah, it is sad.
Yeah.
But,
Jesus. I guess we started with a death and ended with a death.
Yeah.
That's good.
And I think that's about all I had to say about him, too.
Hell yeah.
Besides that, he's influenced so many people going forward so much that, he perfected... he was one of the first people to really take up stream of consciousness as a form just to complete throughout a novel.
Yeah.
And he just kind of perfected it so people were just afraid to do it.
Yeah, because like, you have to do it as good as him.
Yeah.
Which is very difficult.
Yeah. People are like, what are you trying to do, be Joyce?
Yeah.
But like now you can't write in that way.
That's hilarious.
Yeah, the same thing happened with a...
That's like my only goal as an artist is to just take up an entire form. So if anyone else does it, like, oh, you're just trying to be like him now. Yeah.
Yeah, it's so funny. Or you can just pick a book that nobody reads anymore, like Moby Dick. Like Moby Dick is David Foster Wallace proceeds so directly from Moby Dick, and people are like, oh, David Foster Wallace did all this great stuff. I was like, well, just Herman Melville did that.
Herman.
Yeah. Like the footnotes even. Herman Melville did a lot of that.
Yeah.
But David Foster Wallace was just like, I will do more.
Oh man.
Yeah. But really, really interesting, great man. And there's at the end of this, there's a passage about hell in Portrait of the Artist as Young Man, which is one of the most hair-raising things I've ever read. It's just a priest just describing hell forever and ever and ever. And it's just, and I think I've found it, but I just want to read a little bit before we're done. Yeah. Last and crowning torture of all the tortures of that awful place is the eternity of hell. Eternity, O dread and dire word, eternity, that what mind of man can understand it? And remember, it is an eternity of pain. Even though the pains of hell were not so terrible as they are, yet they would become infinite, as they are destined to last forever. But while they are everlasting, they are at the same time, as you know, intolerably intense and unbearably extensive. To bear even the sting of an insect for all eternity would be a dreadful torment.
Oh my God.
What must it be then to bear the manifold tortures of hell forever, for all eternity? Not for a year or for an age, but forever. Try to imagine the awful meaning of this. You have often seen the sand on the seashore. How fine are its tiny grains? And how many of those tiny little grains go to make up the small handful which a child grasps in its play? Now imagine a mountain of that sand, 1,000,000 miles high, reaching from the earth to the farthest heavens, and 1,000,000 miles broad, extending to a remotest space, and 1,000,000 miles in thickness, and imagine such an enormous mass of countless particles of sand multiplied, as often as there are leaves in the forest, drops of water in the mighty ocean, feathers on birds, scales on fish, hairs on animals, atoms in the vast expanse of the air, and imagine that at the end of every 1,000,000 years a little bird came to that mountain and carried away in its beak a tiny grain of that sand. How many millions upon millions of centuries would pass before that bird had carried away even a square foot of that mountain? How many aeons upon aeons of ages before it had carried away all? Yet at the end of that immense stretch of time, not even one instant of eternity could be said to have ended.
Oh,
all
Jesus
At the end of all those billions and trillions of years, eternity would have scarcely begun. And if that mountain rose again after it had been carried away, and if the bird came again and carried it all away again grain by grain, and if it so rose and sank as many times as there are stars in the sky, atoms in the air, drops of water in the sea, leaves on the trees, feathers upon birds, scales upon fish, hairs upon animals, at the end of all those innumerable risings and sinkings of that immeasurably vast mountain, Not one single instant of eternity could be said to have ended. Even then, at the end of such a period, after that aeon of time, the mere thought of which makes our very brain reel dizzily, eternity would have scarcely begun.
Alright, Catholics need to fucking chill out with this, with the damnation. Jesus Christ. That's just too much. God. I'm so tired. The Irish they need to stop with the God.
Yeah, it's that passage goes on for so much longer than that.
Imagine a stern Irish priest just telling you that when you're like 7 and you're like, God damn it,
Yeah.
like I haven't done anything yet.
Yeah. And it's
Oh
just,
my God.
it's all so well written. And
Alright, I get it, the bird, it takes a long time to take the sand. Alright, I get it. Jesus Christ.
But that chapter is so big, and it just puts the fear of hell in you.
Alright, well.
It's so well done.
On that note, that should put the fear of hellfire in you.
Yeah.
So don't go to hell.
Yeah.
Like Kobe. No, I'm just kidding.
Love you guys.
Yeah. Anyway, that was our 6th episode. Be sure to give us a nice review on iTunes or wherever, and send us an email and like our stuff and share it and just give us reactions.
Yeah. Like it, please.
Statistics. Yeah. Yeah. That'd be cool. Anyway, yeah. That was it.
Thanks for watching.
I'm gonna be gone next weekend, so we might not have a 7th one on time, but we'll come back. It'll happen. Yeah.
It'll be good.
All right.
Good night, all.
See ya.